Hi everyone, welcome to another tutorial on LSET. This video is the third part of the series on pivots in Excel. Today we'll be exploring Power Pivots. It's a strong but a seldom used feature in Excel. This will only be an easy introduction as the mastery over Power Pivots can take quite a while. It's not difficult, but it takes practice. Power Pivots is built on DAX. Now what is DAX, you might ask? Now DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions. Is it a programming language? Not really. Is it a query language? That's also not quite true. The answer probably lies somewhere in between. Officially, if you look at Microsoft's own description, they like to call it a formula expression language. And this formula expression language called DAX also lies at the heart of Power BI. One reason why whatever you do on Power Pivots can easily be combined with Power BI reporting. So let's begin. The first order of the day is to understand why should we use Power Pivots at all. After all, don't pivots already give us enough capability in terms of looking at data and analyzing it? Well, there are several reasons why Power Pivots should be explored. So as you can see on the screen, these are some of the important pointers for trying to understand and learn Power Pivots. For one, it can manage large amounts of data, much more than you generally conventionally can handle on a single or quite a few different segregated Excel sheets. The other important reason behind Power Pivots is that you can build a data model to combine data from different tables seamlessly. When you look at the example, this will probably get clearer. But for those people who are well acquainted with the study of DBMS or RDBMS, might understand that many times in the universe of data, you have multiple different tables, and these tables can then be combined with different keys like primary keys, foreign keys, and so on. So these keys help to combine two or more than two different tables so that there is a relationship that exists between different data tables. Not only that, what Power Pivot also allows you to do is use data from different sources. So you can combine data practically from different sources, like you can pull data from an Oracle table, you can pull data from Teradata, you can pull data from Excel, you can pull data from JSON files. So not only can you pull it from different tables, but also different sources of databases as well. Data visualization and analysis. Since we are talking about Microsoft tools in terms of Excel, remember that whatever you can do with a Power Pivot, you can then expand the visualization of that using Power BI. The same data model that you will build in order to make a Power Pivot can then be utilized and easily accommodated within Power BI as a data model. And then you can also use charts or pivot charts within Excel to add additional power and capability of visualization to what you make in a Power Pivot. You can connect it to other tools. We already gone over this. So Power BI, for example, you can easily combine the data model that you have within Power Pivots to Power BI, and that gives it additional strength in terms of reporting. So how does this work? To understand this, you'll have to first look at what happens if you don't use Power Pivots. So out here, what we have in a folder is a set of three different tables of data. Now, what do we have in these three different tables? So the first table, for instance, is called sales data. That's the first table. So what does a sales data table have? So let's take a look at this. So as the name of the file suggests, the sales data table has information around the sales made by, let's say, an agricultural equipment organization. It has the date of the sale, it has the name of the customer, it has the equipment that the customer has bought, and it has the number of units sold. So for example, the first row of data in this data table, what does it mean? It would technically mean for us that on 29th of November 2022, the customer called Hadrian's Farm Market, probably an agricultural equipment reseller. Hadrian's Farm Market bought 5 harvesters, and so that's your first row. And similarly, so this is basically the meaning of sales data that you see here. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at what the other data tables are. So along with the sales data table, what you also have is a product catalog. So what is the product catalog? So if you take a look, the product catalog basically will have a list of the different products and then additional information around it. So for example, here what you have is, let's say, the product number or the serial number of the product, followed by the product name, whether it's a harvester, whether it's a rotary tiller or a tractor. It has a price of the harvester, the price of the rotary tiller. This is per unit price, by the way. And then you have some additional information like the cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold, it has the cost of sales, general and administrative. So basically the cost has been broken up into 2 different heads here. So you have cost of goods sold, or COGS, and you have cost of sales, general administrative, generally referred to in accounting circles as SGA, right? So this table basically has cost and the price. But that's not all. You also have a third table in this, which is the customer database. So the customer database basically has additional information on the various customers, like Hadrian's Farm Market, for instance, that you saw on the sales data sheet. So here, what you will notice is you'll have additional information in here. This additional information will have things like the customer's name, the phone number, the state, the region, the customer discount rate, tax rate, so on and so forth. So all this is pretty useful information. Now let's imagine for a second that you had to combine data from these 3 different tables. So very often in business, what happens is that when you have sales data, that's by itself, it's not good enough. As a business, what you're interested in is things like revenue, things like cost, things like profitability. You might also be interested in calculating other metrics. For example, you might want to look at total revenue or sum of total revenue. Or you might want to look at things like average cost or average cost of goods sold. Things of that nature. So when you have to do this, what are your options? Your options are, one, that you probably start applying, and to keep this example simple, I'm just working with 3 different tables. In real life, you might deal with 4, 5, 6 different tables. These tables might all come from different sources. So for example, the sales data might come from the sales team. The product catalog might come from the product and marketing division. The customer database might come from your customer retention division. So the data sources might be different. They might be coming from different teams. It is also possible that they are in different locations. And then what you'll have to probably do is, every time you get this data, you might have to first of all bring all of this data on one sheet, which would mean that technically you might have to apply a series of lookup functions to basically pull data from different tables onto one single sheet. And then once you've done that, every time the data sheet changes, you might have to just refresh the data and then pull the information again. But that's not it. Every time you want to run the functions, you'll have to first define the functions. You'll have to refresh the pivots. And then from a visualization perspective, you're still at a loss, because you have to then manually refresh the charts to look at it. And this is where something like a Power Pivot might give you that extra additional leverage. If you invest the time and effort to actually utilize Power Pivots and analyze the data by first of all building up a data table, or to be more precise, a data model, and basis that data model, then if you were to fetch data from different sheets, you will begin to start see and appreciate the actual reason Power Pivots are called Power Pivots. So let's begin. So let's say we already have a different Excel sheet pulled here, the one that we were on. And on this sheet, what you'll see is Power Pivots is already showing up at the top. The reason for that is that I've already added this pack. So in general, if you've just installed Excel and you have normal functionality, you're probably not going to see Power Pivots. In order to see Power Pivots, what you'll have to do is, if you go to the option for File, and within the option for File, if you take a look, you will see there's an option. There is something called Options right at the bottom. If you click on Options, from within Options, you will see something called Add-ins. If you click on Add-ins, what you'll see here is that the Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel is already added here, but if it is not added, you will see it in this section, which is Inactive Application Add-ins. If you click on it, and then once you click on it, at the bottom you'll click on Manage, and within Manage, the option you want to select is COM Add-ins. Once you select COM Add-ins and go to Next, it will ask you, it will give you 3 different options if you want to use Microsoft Streamer. For example, the option that you want to select from those 3 is that you want to use Microsoft for Power Pivots. That is the option that you'll utilize. And once you've done that, what will happen is you will notice that Power Pivots will show up at the top the same way as it's showing up right now, right? So if you go to Power Pivots, you will see there are some options in here like Manage, Measures, KPIs, and so on, right? So what is Manage? So Manage is basically that part of the Power Pivots that allows you to bring in data or import data from different tables, different sources, and so on. What it also allows you to do is it allows you 2 different views of this information. It allows you to look at the actual data. It also allows you to pull up that section from where you can visually or diagrammatically look at the data tables and define the relationships between these different tables. So that is what Manage would allow you to do. What is Measures? So basically, Measures is when you want to come up with different matrices. So for instance, let's say basis the sales data that you just looked at, if you want to come up with things like total sales, or come up with things like total sales, average profit, things of that nature, you want to define your own metrics, then you can do that using Measures. And then you have KPIs. This term is a bit misleading, I would say, because generally KPIs or key performance indicators generally KPIs are referred to as metrics in business, but it could vary from one organization to the other. In many organizations, you'll see that measures and KPIs are used interchangeably. But in this context, what a KPI refers to is something that you generally refer to as minimum service levels and expected service levels. So basically the minimum number that you want to see for a metric, and the expected number or the voice of client number for a metric. So that is what KPIs are. And within this, what you can do is, just given that you defined a metric, you can then also go ahead and select the KPI levels. So you can use a ragged scheme, a red, amber, green light scheme, wherein below a certain level, you can mark it as amber or red, and above a certain level, you can give it the color coding of green. And that also can be extremely intuitive and powerful when you look at a visual representation of that information on a pivot. All right, so now that we have seen this, how do we deal with this? So your first step in order to use Power Pivot is, first of all, to import data or to basically retrieve data from other sources. So if you go ahead and click on Manage, for instance, within Manage, what you'll see is the moment you click on Manage, it opens up a completely different screen. This is the Power Pivot screen, where it will give you a lot of those Power Pivot options. From this screen, remember that currently you are on data view. If you see on the right hand side, it says data view. There's a diagram view as well, which we'll see shortly. The diagram view is the view from which you can build your data model. You can see the metadata of the tables, and you can build your data model. So a helpful way of thinking about this is that the data view shows you the actual data, and the diagram view shows you the metadata and the connectivity between those metadata elements and the relationships between the different tables that you have on data. So from here, what you'll notice immediately is that you can extract or retrieve your data from different sources. So there is an option called from database. So here you can see from SQL Server, Access, from analysis services. Analysis services is another Microsoft functionality, which is again built on DAX. You can get it from data services like the OData feed. And the most common one is the from other sources. So from other sources, you can see there's a long, extensive list, like the SQL Server, like SQL Azure, Microsoft Access, Oracle, Teradata, Sybase. It's a long list, and generally you'll find it pretty hard to find a database which is in frequent use and it's not listed here. And then at the bottom, you'll see some of the more common ones. So this is the one that we are interested in currently, Excel file. So we want to pull in data from the Excel file. Which Excel file? Now you'll remember those 3 different Excel files that we saw in a different folder somewhere else on the computer. So those are the files that we want to pull in. And to do that, if you click on Excel file and you click on next, so it says, okay, friendly connection name is Excel path. So what you can do is you can simply go ahead and click on browse. And once you click on browse, so that is on the D drive. So let's go ahead and go to the D drive on this one. Let's say we go to the D drive and go to data made up. And let's say we want to bring in the sales data, right? So click on the sales data, click on open. Once you've done that, make sure that you do mark used first row as header, as column headers. This is important because you want to clearly indicate to Power Pivots that the first row that it sees is the metadata. It's the column headers. It's not the actual data. So click on that. For now, you can bypass advanced and test connection. We don't need to test it, primarily because our connection is purely of a local system. So you don't need to establish or test the connection first. Now, when you click on next on this, and it takes some time, and then it eventually says that, okay, here we have a source table, sheet 1, and it's getting the sales data. You can click on preview and filter. If you do that, it will probably show you the information. So if you remember the sales data sheet, the first column that you had to do with the date. It has the customer name, the equipment type, the number of units, and so on. So we are good with this. We click on OK. And we can click on finish. You don't need to necessarily preview and filter. Sometimes it's still good so that you make sure that you are importing the file that you actually intended to apply or intended to actually import initially. So make sure it's the correct file you are pulling in. Now, when you click on finish, it takes a while, says import, and it says success, 100 rows transferred. That is correct. I built that fictional data. I know it has 100 rows. So this is accurate. You can just click on close, and there we are. So the moment we click on close, what you see on this one is that it has brought in that data sheet or brought in the data information here. So this is the first sheet, and it says sheet 1 right here, and you have this information showing up here. Okay. Now, once you have done this, let's pull in the other data sources as well. So you can just go to from other data source, and you can click here. You can choose the option from Excel. You can browse for that file. Let's say the next one we want to bring in is the product catalog. So we bring in the product catalog. We make sure we click the option for use first row as column headers. You click on next. Right, it does bring up that sheet. If you want, you can preview, and this is correct. Our product catalog only had 3 different equipment types, along with the price, cost of goods sold, cost of SG&A. And you just click on OK, and you click on finish. Now you will see that it will try and get in that information. Preparing for import. It says success, 3 rows transferred. Click on close on this one, and you have this information as well added. Now what you see here is that you have a sheet 1 out here, right? And you have a sheet 11. If you want, you can also rename these sheets. That will obviously be helpful in other ways that we will see. Now, this is not the only way in which you can bring data. The other thing that you could have also done is, if you wanted, you could have also copied and pasted data also, and that would have also worked for us. But this is a better way because you are just directly pulling it in. So if you go back here, you click on Excel file again, and this time let's choose the third file that we had, which was customer database. So let's select that, click on OK, use first row as column headers, click on next. I'm not going to preview this one, just let's click on finish. And once you click on finish, and it's a success, 6 rows transferred, click on close. And now what you will see is all of the data has been pulled in right here. Okay, so now that we have this information, if you want to understand what the data model kind of looks like right now, if you just go and click on the diagram view, you will see it will show you the current state of the database. So as you can see on the current state of the database, your sheet 1, you have a sheet 1, right? It has the date, customer, equipment, unit sold. Do you remember what sheet 1 was? So remember, sheet 1 was nothing but your sales data, right? And then look at your second table. So your second table was nothing but it was the product number, product name, price, cost of goods sold, cost of sales, general and administrative, or SG&A. What was this? This was your product database, right? Or product catalog. And your third table was basically your customer database. As you can see, it has the customer name, customer phone number, city, state, and so on and so forth. Currently, as you can see, that these exist as islands. So these are kind of data islands. As you can see, they exist in isolation. We still don't have that connectivity between them, right? So we can go ahead and build that connectivity between them. So before we do that, let's do one quick thing. So sheet 1 that we have here, remember that this was sales, right? And then you had sheet 2, right? The second sheet that you were working on. So in order to work on the sheet 2, for instance, that we have the information on, what you can do is you can again go ahead and give it a different name first. Okay, so let's call sheet 11 as, this was product, right? Let's just call it product. And then once we've called it product, we have sheet 11. Now sheet 11 is again going to be your customer data. So for simplicity, let's just call it customer. So we have called it customer right now. Okay, so now we have gone ahead and named the 3 different data tables that we had pulled in or retrieved. We've called it sales, product, and customer, right? Let's go back to our data view now. Okay, as you can see that now on the data view, these tables have their names as well. So our entire metadata is now updated, right? Now since this metadata is now updated, what is now equally important for us to understand is how are these connected. There is a way that these are all connected, right? So how are these actually connected? Now, to understand how these are actually connected, what you must bear in mind is that if you remember the first table, which had date and then the customer name, right? Now, that customer name is the same as the name of the customer that you have here. So the first one might be called customer, and under this table, it might be called customer name, but they represent the same information, right? They are the same field. So what we can do is we can just click on that and then drag an arrow all the way to customer name in this table. And once you do that, you will see that it has now created a relationship. Now, within this relationship, you will see that it gives you a number 1 and then it gives you an asterisk mark at the end. So when you see this, what you should bear in mind is that the number 1 represents the so this is what you call a one is to many relationship, where you have one on the right side and the many on the left side or under sales. What does this mean? What it means is that on the customer table, for instance, Hadrian's Market will only be mentioned once. But Hadrian's Market has been used multiple times on sales data because there'll be different multiple rows of sales for Hadrian's Market. So that's why the many is represented on the left side. The many is going to be represented by an asterisk in a relationship. Okay. So now we have this information. Now the next thing that you could probably do in order to connect these is you could potentially go ahead and then connect the next thing, which will be important on this, which is if you see the sales data, under sales data, you also have something known as equipment. Now that equipment is the same as product name. So this field right here is actually the same as this field under product name. So what you can also do is then you can go ahead and connect product name. And these also, as you can see currently, represent a 1:many relationship where 1 is the product name and the many is the equipment. The logic is the same. Under the product catalog table, you will see that each of the equipments of the products, like the harvester, the rotary tiller, the tractor, they only appear once. They're only listed once. However, you will see under the sales data that these terms appear multiple times because you're obviously selling them again and again. So that's why you have a 1:many relationship. And again, in case I didn't tell you, these are also known as the cardinality of a relationship. These are known as cardinality of a relationship. Okay. So now that we have looked at this, how does something like this truly work? So to understand that better, let's go back to the data view. So remember that the diagram view gives you the actual model, the actual Power Pivot data model. If you want to look at, you can click on the diagram view to try and take a look at it. Okay, so let's go back to the data view, right? So on the data view, for instance, you have these three different tables at the moment, correct? And now you have sales, product, and customer as well, right? So now let's say that we want to go ahead and calculate some additional calculated columns for this. So how does something like this work? So let's say on this table, the place where it says add column, we can simply go ahead and let's say we want to pull in revenue out here. So we want to pull in revenue out here. Okay. And then let's say that not only do we want to pull in revenue, apart from revenue, what we also want to pull in, let's say, is the cost. So we go ahead and enter another column called cost. And then once we have looked at revenue and cost, let's say what we are interested in next is going to be, let's say we are interested in gross profit. Gross profit is going to be nothing but your revenue minus your COGS, or cost of operating expenses. And let's say that once you've done gross profit, the next thing that you're interested in is operating profit, right? So we can simply put in operating profit out here, right? And we can calculate these values. So how do we calculate revenue? So remember that revenue is nothing but the number of units sold times the price of that unit, right? So in order to do that, how do we achieve it? So this part works a lot like we already seen Excel operate. So you put an equal to symbol, which is the symbol for a formula basically. And so we basically want to multiply the units sold, which is this. Let's go ahead and click here. And we want to do the number of units sold. And you want to multiply this by the cost of each unit. So generally, what would you do? So generally, if you're not using Power Pivots, what you would have to do is you have to then go and get that information by using some sort of lookup function like VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP. So you look up harvester or you look up rotary tiller on the other data table, right? But then here, what you'll have to do is the inbuilt functionality for this is going to be to use another feature within this, and the other feature within this is called related. So what the keyword related does is once you type in the keyword related, it is going to pull up the fields or the data from the other related tables. Remember that within the data model, we have connected these different data sets now. So by using the keyword related, now you can pull up data from the related tables. As you can see, it is giving you data from the customer table as well as from the product catalog table. So the one that we are interested in is called product price, right? So we can click on product price and close the bracket. Once you've done that, what you will notice is that it is going to compute the revenue for each and every line item. And this is great. You do not have to go ahead and do a series of different computations and lookups to get this data. Let's go ahead and replicate this for cost. So cost, as you remember, was broken up into two different heads, right? The two different heads that we had broken up cost into were what? So the cost, if you recall, was broken up into two different heads, which is the COGS, cost of goods sold, and you also had cost of SG&A, or simply in business as it's known as SG&A, right? So our cost is going to be the sum of those two. So how do we access the sum of these two costs? The costs are not there on this table, right? So it's the same way. So if you use the keyword again, and it gives you all the costs. So what we'll pick up is the cost of goods sold. That's the first variable. Then we can replicate the process and pick up cost. So this is the SG&A cost. We've picked it up. And this should then go ahead and give us the sum or the total cost of this. So as you can see, we also have that information now, right? But there is one catch to this. Remember that this, what you've calculated right now, is the cost of one single unit. Is the cost of one single unit. So what we'll now have to do is make sure that this cost of one single unit times the number of units sold gives us the actual cost, right? So let's go ahead and recompute that, and there we are. We now have the actual cost for all the units. Perfect. Now, in order to calculate gross profit, remember what is gross profit? Gross profit is going to be nothing but the revenue that you have minus the COGS, right? Revenue minus cost of goods sold would be gross profit, and then you can have operating profit as well. So let's go ahead and quickly do that. So if I wanted to calculate gross profit, what I would do here is going to be the revenue that we have, and we're going to, so let's go ahead and type it again. Let's go to gross profit, and within gross profit, okay, 1 second, let's redo the revenue part. Okay. So now let's go ahead and calculate the gross profit. To calculate the gross profit, what you'll have to do on this one is, first and foremost, you click on revenue, and from revenue, what you'll have to do is take away the cost of goods sold. So if you go to this, you click on related, and you click on cost of goods sold, and that will give you the gross profit, right, on this one. And again, remember that in order to make this correct, you will have to do it times the number of units sold, right? So that's your gross profit. Okay. Now, what would be your operating profit? Your operating profit is going to be nothing but, it's going to be your gross profit minus the SG&A, right? Now again, remember that the SG&A will have to be multiplied by the number of units sold, right? So let's pull the SG&A first. So here we have the SG&A and times the number of units sold. So the number of units sold is here, and once you calculate it, it should give you the operating profit as well, right? So as you can see, you can do a series of complex calculations right here from this screen. Okay. Now is this all that you can do? Well, not really. There is much more to Power Pivots than what you've just looked at. Right? So, in order to explore this further, let's go ahead and first of all X out of this, right? So you can close out of this. If you want to get back into it, if you just click on manage, and it will show you all the screens and all the information that you've generated so far. And if you click on the top right, you can close from there. Okay, so now within this you see that there is something called measures, right? And within this, if you click on, let's say you click on a new measure, and let's say we want to apply the new measure on the table called sales, and the measure that we want within sales, let's say we want to calculate the number of different sales that we have done, right? So we're going to just define it as number of sales. Okay, and the description is again going to be number of sales. And out here what you can see is you can then type a formula. So this formula again works pretty similar to what you would generally expect within Excel. So let's say we want to do a count, right? So we can simply do a count function. It says counts the number of values in a column, so we can do a count A, and let's say we want to go ahead and count, let's say we count the sales, date, right? So let's count the sales date and click on OK. All right, so well, it's disappeared, but not really. If you go back to manage, you will see it. So let's go back to manage, and once you go back to manage, what you'll see is, well, right under sales in the lower section or the lower half, you will see that a certain measure has appeared. If you want to look at it further, you can just expand the width of the column and you will be able to see this information. So you see it says number of sales is 100, right? Okay, now let's go ahead and let's say we want to look at another measure. So X out of the screen will take you to the normal screen. You can go back to measures, you can go to new measures, and let's say we want to look at within sales, let's say we want to look at average revenue, right? So let's say we want to look at average revenue, and let's say the description of this is average revenue per sale, right? So how do we get that? Remember that we have an average function within Excel, and you also know that we have a column called revenue which we had created, right? This is a calculated column. So let's go ahead and click on OK, and there we are. If you want to look at it, you simply have to just go to manage, and you will see that within this now you have the average revenue right there, right? So this is how it functions. So you have the number of sales, you also have the average revenue right there. Okay, now another thing that you can possibly do on this is you can also introduce a measure directly out here. What I mean by that is, if you click here, if you type in an equal to symbol right there, okay, and from there let's say we want to do an average, and once you have done an average, let's say we want to find out average cost, right? So again, if you scroll down, you will see sales, you see sales cost right there. Okay, so what you can do is you can simply go ahead and click on cost on this one and close the bracket, right? And then it will compute that information and give you the average cost. Now remember that we had not done this from the specific window that you get for measures, so that's why it's calling it measure 1. What we can do out here is we can go ahead and change the name of this, and we can just call it average cost, right? And change it, and you've seen that now it has changed the name of that specific measure to average cost, and it's giving that measure of the average cost as 9129. All right, so this is great because this allows you to now do multiple different things from here. Okay, So now let's go ahead and close out of this window on this one. All right. Now, is that pretty much it? Well, not really. Now comes the fun part. Now, I know all of you know how to make a pivot table, right? You can do it by a shortcut. You can do it from this option of insert pivot table. Let's go ahead and insert pivot table. But this time, let's select from data model as the option, right? And let's say we want to do it on a new worksheet. Okay. Now what you'll notice is, fascinatingly enough, now this is a screen that you guys are already used to in terms of what is there on a pivot table. But if you notice carefully, now what you have is, you have information from all the three tables right there. This is something that you haven't seen before. I mean, when I say you haven't seen before, I mean, if you look at a traditional pivot, you have not seen before. But this gives you the option to actually look at all the fields of the different combined tables together. So let's say we click on customer, and let's say we pull the customer's name in rows. Now from this, let's say what we also want to do from this one is, let's get the sales data. So let's say what we're interested in is revenue, for instance, right? So let's say we are interested in revenue for each of these customers. So I pull in revenue out here, and you know that revenue being a numeric field, the default value is going to be sum. So you have sum of revenue. If you want, you can also change it to average of revenue. So you can already begin to see that we have just combined the data from two different tables, this time using pivots, and we are seeing all of that information together, right? So you can do sum of revenue, you can do average of revenue, and so on and so forth, right? So this is what makes this really powerful as a tool, because it allows you to combine a lot of these together, right? And then once you've done this, in addition to this that you already looked at, what you can also then begin to do is, if you want to explore some of the other things. So for instance, there's an option called slicer, right? So let's go ahead and pick up slicer, for instance. And let's say we do a slicer by equipment, right? So once you do a slicer by equipment, so what you will begin to notice is that while currently what the pivot gives you is the overall list of the different customers and the sum of revenue, but from here I could basically look at different slices of that revenue for each of the customers. So for example, if you click on harvester, it tells you what is that revenue that you have for harvester for each of the customers. If you click on rotary tiller, it gives you that information. If you click on tractor, it gives you that information. It will also help you if you were to sort this information. So if you just sort on sum of revenue and sort it from largest to smallest, now you can begin to realize that this naturally gives you the progression of where are you getting maximum revenue for by each equipment type. So this is pretty useful in terms of a quick analysis of how you want to look at information. And that's not it. What you can also do is you can also build pivot charts on top of this. The pivot chart can then help you look at this graphically as well. So as you know that with pivot table analyze, for instance, you have the option for a pivot chart. So you can also do that in effect, so you can always build up a pivot chart. And let's say you were to build up a pie chart, for example, there you are. So now what you notice is that with the pie chart, you can now see the raw data in a tabular format on the left side. You can also see it visually, correct? And then notice what happens when you click on the different options. You will see that immediately not only is the table refreshing, you also have the pie chart refreshing accordingly. So this gives it real visual capabilities, real visual power for analysis by using really simple tools on Excel. So this talks a lot about the powerful aspects of the elements that we have within the power pivot option that you have. Now remember that with this, with what you're looking at, another option that you can use is KPIs. You can also define KPIs if you wanted to, right? So, and the way you can do in terms of defining KPIs is for example, let's say we were looking at sum of revenue, right? So let's say that when we're looking at sum of revenue out here, so let's say you have a KPI based field as average revenue, for instance, right? And basis the average revenue, and what we can do is, if you want to do an exact comparison on this one, let's try and do one thing. Let's change it from sum of revenue so that you can take a look at this. Let's change it to average revenue right here. So it's the same thing, but it's now showing you the average revenue, right? And let's just make sure that we have right number of decimal places. There we are. Now within this, what you could also do is, if you were to actually go ahead and take a look at the KPIs in this, and let's say you selected the option for new KPI, right? Let's say you were to look at average revenue, for instance, and instead of measure, let's say you picked up an absolute value, and we're going to define that absolute value as, let's say, 10,000, right? For instance. Now, what does this mean? What will it do to it? So let's go ahead and select that as 10,000, for example. And what you can also do from here is you can pick up certain ranges, right? So for instance, let's say we say that below 6,000 is really bad, so you want to mark it as red, okay? And let's say that even though you're doing 10,000, but let's say that anything above 12,000 we are kind of doing well, right? So you can go ahead and select 12,000, right? We'll keep this as the icon style on the left hand side, and you can click on OK. So now what you have here is average revenue status. Now this is nothing but the numeric format of the red, amber, green that we have just built, right? If you want to look at this, what you can do is, if you go back to the pivot table list that we were just looking at, and within pivot table list, you see that now you have that red, amber, green appear on the bottom of the selection. If you expand that selection, for instance, right, it shows you the status on this. All that you'll have to do is, if you uncheck the status on this one, right, and you select it back, now what you have is, you have the red, amber, green statuses added to it. So it kind of visually tells you where we are in terms of the base revenue, and it also gives you color coding as per the KPI levels that you've set. So as you can see that there are several interesting things. Let's do a quick recap of the kind of things that you can do. So for one, you can combine data from different tables. You can combine them from different sources. Then what you can do is, you can define a certain data model by relationships between the different metadata fields that you have. Once you've defined the relationships, it becomes easy for you to create calculated fields. It becomes easy for you to create different measures. You can do KPIs. You can bring in, you can then create a pivot table if you want, by combining data from different tables, not from one table, but from different tables. And then if you want, you can also look at it, different visualizations in terms of, you can do pivot charts, you could use slicers and so on. And this will enhance your capability of looking at the data and analyzing it. All right, so that kind of brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully this was interesting and informational as well. See you next time. Thank you for watching.